Hi, everybody. My name is Alan Soldowski. I'm Director of Creative Writing at San Jose State University and the executive producer of the 2021 Legacy of Poetry Festival that we're calling Closing the Distance, Sheltering in Technologies. I hope everyone is continuing to stay safe and well and is at home viewing this Zoom edition of the annual Legacy of Poetry Festival celebration. For more information about all the events we're presenting during the week of San Jose State's Legacy of Poetry Festival, go to the URL on your screen, which we'll also place in the chat. I'm going to be your announcer for this special event, a masterclass in independent literary publishing featuring the founding editors of Noemi Press, Carmen Jimenez Smith and J. Michael Martinez, with managing editor Sarah Jemski. Before I introduce this afternoon's MC, let me thank the sponsors who have made the SJSU Legacy of Poetry Festival possible. The 2021 SJSU Legacy of Poetry Festival, Closing the Distance, Sheltering in Technologies, is produced by the Poets and Writers Coalition and the Creative Writing Program at San Jose State University. We want to thank the following groups and organizations for making this particular masterclass on independent publishing possible. Our principal sponsor is the SJSU Poets and Writers Coalition in association with the Associated Students of San Jose State University. Additional sponsorship is provided by the English and Comparative Literature Department at San Jose State University, the Diasporic People's Writing Collective, Read Magazine, and the Poetry Center San Jose in association with Poets and Writers, Inc. Additional co-sponsors of the 2021 Legacy of Poetry Festival are Noemi Press and Poetry Flash, the West's poetry newsletter. We also wish to thank those on the Legacy of Poetry Festival Zoom production and marketing teams who provided invaluable support and assistance behind the scenes. Clifton Gold, special events producer in the University Advancement Office, and also thanks to the efforts of engineer production coordinators Keith Sanders, Terry Graziani, and Juan Cerna, and to Carmen Kennedy, president of the Diasporic People's Writers Coalition, and to Helen Maservi, supervising instructor and publisher for Read Magazine. Thank you all for giving so much of your time and energy to make it possible for us at SJSU to celebrate National Poetry Month during the COVID-19 pandemic. And now let me turn things over to this afternoon's MC, Am Shalik, who is the lead poetry editor and copy chief of Read Magazine. Her poetry and fiction have appeared in the Catamaran Literary Reader, Gone Lawn, DMQ Review, and other numerous literary journals. Here now is our host, Anne Shalik.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2021 Legacy of Poetry Festival. Thank you all for joining us for the very first event of the festival, a masterclass in starting a literary press. Most of us here are writers, not entrepreneurs, so the idea of founding a press might seem daunting to us, but our guests are here to help demystify the process. Our three panelists today are from Noemi Press. Noemi Press was founded in 2002 by our guest Carmen Jimenez Smith and co-founder Evan Lavender Smith. In the first year, Noemi Press published one poetry chapbook, but it has since grown to include full-length poetry collections as well as other genres, and publishes about 8 books a year. Noemi's mission is to publish and promote the work of emerging and established writers, with a special emphasis on writers traditionally underrepresented by larger publishers, including women, people of color, and LGBTQ writers. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Born in New York, poet Carmen Jimenez Smith is the daughter of South American immigrants. a Canto Mundo Fellow. She earned her BA in English right here at San Jose State University, and an MFA in creative writing from the Iowa Writers Workshop. She is the publisher and editor-in-chief of Neomi Press, and the author of 7 poetry collections, as well as a critically acclaimed memoir. Her poetry collection, Milk and Filth, was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, and her latest collection, Be Recorder, was shortlisted for both the National Book Award and the PEN Open Book Award. She is a professor of English at Virginia Tech. J. Michael Martinez is the author of 3 collections of poetry, including, most recently, The Museum of the Americas, which was selected for the National Poetry Series and longlisted for the National Book Award. He is also a recipient of the Walt Whitman Award for the Academy of American Poets. He is a poetry editor of Neomi Press, and his writings have been widely anthologized. He is currently a visiting assistant professor of poetry at St. Lawrence University, but we are very happy to note that J. Michael will be joining the creative writing faculty here at San Jose State in fall 2021. Sarah Jemsky is the managing editor of Neomi Press and the publicity and publications specialist at the University of Arizona Poetry Center. Her chapbook, Centralia, was published in 2015 by Pork Belly Press, and her work has appeared in numerous literary journals. We are going to begin the program with a pre-recorded conversation with our guests, and that will be followed by a live poetry reading. And at the very end, we will have time for some Q&A, so please keep your questions in mind, or if you like, put them in the chat for our Q&A monitor. So with no further ado, let the masterclass begin. For many writers and MFA students, we aspire to the achievements that you have, that you embody, having started and worked and are working for a great independent literary press. So I'm very excited to talk with you today. Let's start at the beginning. I know, Carmen, you were one of the founders of Neomi Press. Could you talk a little bit about what led you to found the press and how you got started?
Yeah, sure. After graduate school, I moved to San Francisco, and I lived near Valencia Street. And that was where, was it New College? I think it was New College, was residing there. And they had this giant room of chapbook. It was like a chapbook sales. It was the weirdest thing. And I would go in there and I just thought, gosh, this looks fun. This looks easy. I wanted to be a journalist when I was young, and I liked the idea of production a lot. So that was one piece of it, just curiosity about creating small book objects. But the other piece of it, I think, was, this was a consciousness that developed more explicitly over time, was an awareness that there were no, presses that were publishing folks of color and marginalized groups that weren't defined by the fact that they did that, as opposed to presses that had cachet because they had cachet, but also just happened to publish, primarily white people or, one person of color. This was, in 1999, 2000 that I start seeing these things. And I had a friend who came upon a Vandercook, a giant, not little, letterpress, and I thought, well, I want to play with this, and I thought it was going to be a one-off, and I did a chapbook, and it was very addicting. It was very exciting to collaborate with someone and give them an object and bring the object and introduce the work into the world. And that over time evolved to publishing full-length books. And our, the vision of being a press that nurtured aesthetically dynamic work. For the most part, I think we're interested in work that has a strong lyric center, but that's about it. That's probably the only thing you would see in common. And that we wanted to publish and cultivate emerging voices. So that's what we started doing, and the press has evolved in lots of different ways, but really the impetus was curiosity.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you started very small with one chapbook that you did by hand on your own letterpress. That's wonderful, and you've expanded so much. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got funding to publish books at the very beginning, and maybe how that funding picture has changed over time?
Yeah, that funder was Chase Bank. It was on my credit cards. It was incredibly expensive. It felt like important work, and even though I just felt like it was something that needed to be done, and so it was definitely out of pocket. But the first few chapbooks, for example, I had a friend who worked at Oracle, and I just had him make 500 copies in his office to like put inside of the chapbook. The letterpress wasn't mine, but I was able to, finesse my friends to let me use it. So it was a lot of that, like, trying to keep the labor at a minimum and the costs at a minimum. I guess the thing is, I never thought it would go anywhere. I really thought it was just going to be, it was a lark in many ways. It wasn't serious. There wasn't any kind of plan. The plan came around as time went by, but it could have collapsed at any moment in those first few years, and I would not have been surprised.
So that's interesting that it evolved as you went along. What was the inflection point where you realized that your press was really had a chance of an even greater success, and that you could make it grow?
Well, I think a couple of different things happened. First of all, more people like J. Michael and Sarah became involved because I am by no means any kind of infrastructure adjacent expert. And the fact was that people started caring about what we were doing, and we just coalesced as a team really well and developed an ethos, I would say, an editorial ethos that acknowledged maybe the way in which certain voices weren't necessarily cultivated because of white supremacy, and trying to remediate that. And so I guess just when, like, folks started putting their hands on it, besides me and besides the other founding editor, and it started to feel like people wanted to do this with the press, wanted to help it along, even though, we're all volunteer. I think that was important.
So can you talk a little bit about your decision to become a 501c3 nonprofit? I think a lot of our listeners will be interested to know what the benefit is to becoming a nonprofit publisher.
I'm going to leave that. Sarah can answer that question much better than me, because again, like, it felt like that's what everyone said to do at the time. They just said, don't, be a nonprofit. And I thought, okay, like, because other small presses were nonprofits.
Yeah, the decision to become a nonprofit was Carmen's before I became involved with the press about 7 years ago. But the benefits that it's afforded us mostly are through funding. We are able to apply for grants through the National Endowment for the Arts and other location-specific or subject-specific grants that we wouldn't otherwise be able to. And that has saved us sometimes when we needed it most. So I would say that's one of the benefits.
Sounds like a good idea to me. I've noticed that there are a lot more nonprofit publishers now. Seems like a good route for a small literary press. So I am very interested to know how J. Michael Martinez and Sarah Jemsky got involved with this press. I know that without excellent people, a company can't thrive. So could the two of you tell me a little bit about that?
I can start since I sort of alluded to it a second ago. I was getting my MFA in poetry at New Mexico State. Carmen was my teacher there and mentor there. And I was an intern for Neomi at first. I was mailing books, and I was very young even for a person who's usually in an MFA program. I was barely 22, 23. And an opening came. We lost the managing editor pretty suddenly, and I labored pretty hard over an email that I sent to Carmen saying, I know that I'm very young and I don't have a ton of experience, but I do have some. Here's what it is, and I think I can do this. And she took the chance and said yes, and the rest is history.
How about J. Michael?
Yeah, and Carmen, feel free to jump in as I narrate. I think it was in 2010, Francisco Aragon invited, out of Letras Latinas, invited maybe 5 or 6 editors, Latina, to, what was the name of the retreat, Carmen? It was in Chicago?
I thought it's Ocho Poetas, though. I thought that's what it was, because it was you, me, Elena Minor, Francisco, the guy who does the magazine in the Central Valley, and Roberta Harrison. So I think it was called Ocho Poetas. I'm kind of losing the names, but
yeah. So, well, in any case, so we were invited to a retreat, the 6 or 7 of us, and Carmen and I knew each other before then, but while we were there, we just started talking and going for walks and writing poetry. And one of the conversations that occurred there was to join on as an editor for me and Neomi, and to really push aesthetically and look for young writers of color that we could promote, particularly with a certain aesthetic that wasn't getting as published then, and with the impetus to begin to publish writers like that so that it would get out into the world as a viable form, that this aesthetic operates no matter what racial background, and to publish those, as there was a very particular absence at that time. And I think we've been pretty successful in promoting those writers, as now more presses are publishing writers operating in that aesthetic who are people of color, in that vein that we were doing. So does that sketch it out? What do you think, Carmen? Is that pretty good? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other important piece I would add to both of these editors joining the team is participating actively in bringing a book to life. And J. Michael and I have really good editorial chemistry, which has been so important in terms of what's happened in the conversations around the books that we bring into the world, because we try to be as ambitious with an author as possible. We're not a send us your Word file, we'll drop it into InDesign editors. And so what's special about both of these folks is that they're incredibly smart and intuitive and collaborative editors, which, you know, is why they're still here. I hope that's why they're still here.
So it sounds like as a press, you do a lot of developmental editing, you not just the copy editing level. That's wonderful. And it's very unusual, I would think, in today's environment. Do you also, do you rely on your submissions queue, or do you go actually out and actively solicit manuscripts from writers that you think are exciting?
We run a contest every year, and that's how we get our submissions. And there are winners of that contest in both poetry and prose. But often we get more great manuscripts than just the winners. So we often publish from that pool as well, especially if we see something with a lot of potential that needs more work. It's a quick turnaround for our winners. The manuscript has to be basically ready to go so that we can publish it the next year. But if we see a manuscript that does warrant some of that developmental work, we might offer them publication for 2 years or 3 years from now, and work with them on that. But I would say maybe 50-60% of our books are solicited.
So I know that you have some poets on your list that are working in sort of the forefront of what's going on in the poetic landscape today, like Douglas Kearney and Lillian Yvonne Bertram. And so I wonder, how do you think about the balance between being able to sell books and bring in revenue for the press, and on the other hand, just publishing something that you think is really exciting and important? How do you have that conversation?
With our authors or amongst ourselves?
Amongst yourselves, yeah.
I don't think I've ever brought up the money issue. Like my role in this is not even to think of that, but rather to think purely of the work. And I don't think I've ever had that conversation as in regards to dialoguing with a writer about their work and quote unquote how to sell it. In my mind, inevitably, as the project comes to understand itself in the dialogue that the writer and I and the writer and the work have, it comes together as a whole that feels complete, at least with the writers that I've been working with. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of creating a market, I know my mind doesn't really click in that manner to think about if it's sellable or not, as much as like, oh, this is really exciting for me. And then naively, luckily, things work out and other people find it exciting too. But I mean, what do you think, Carmen? Sarah?
That's so interesting. And I feel like this shows the value of presses like yours, that you consider your mission to be paramount, which is to just consider the editorial and literary value of the books. So that's really wonderful. What are some of the early books that Neomi Press published that you're still very proud to keep in print?
I'm very fond of Blood by Shane McCrae, in part because it is a book that J. Michael and I worked very closely on with each other, and also with Shane McCrae himself. J. Michael and I talk a lot about the books that we edit together. So that was a particularly special experience for me.
And one of the latest was Lillian Yvonne Bertram's book. Can you tell me a little bit about your process working with the author for that book?
I can a little bit, but Susie Garcia was the editor for that book, and she's not here with us, unfortunately. But that was the winner of our contest. So that's where it started. And it's a unique book in that it is computational poetry. So it is created in many ways by a computer, though, of course, the author is very much involved in that.
It's very controversial, I think, having the idea of computers writing poetry. But in this case, it was just the computer was an assistant. Is that how you would say it?
I am not entirely sure of the process, but it came to us in its manuscript form, and we were moved by it, and that's what caused it to win the contest. Why we wanted to publish it. I don't think that we're necessarily worried about the controversy of computer-generated poetry, as long as it moves us.
So, could you tell me about some of the surprising challenges that you faced in the early years of Neomi Press? I wonder if you were prepared for some things and then others just came out of left field.
Just, it's a lot of physical labor. It's a lot of sort of the challenges of getting the books to AWP and suitcases and dragging these suitcases down the hallways, and just
I've been there too.
How difficult it is sometimes to create an audience for a book, how difficult it is to explain to an author how difficult it is to create an audience for a book. We are good. I think that we're very good because we all choose books. We all bring books to the table of choosing the books that we publish. Sometimes it's surprising which books don't get attention and why versus other books. Sarah is excellent at predicting those kinds of things. So you kind of develop this canniness that go, but things happen, people are involved. It's a very intimate experience and process. Books are so meaningful to the people who produce them, putting them into the world. As we all know, as writers who publish books, can be very exhilarating, traumatizing, terrifying. And so sometimes that emotional life, how it gets mixed up into the biz part of it has been for me the sometimes surprising, sometimes challenging, but evocative.
How do you support your authors throughout the book promotion phase?
We do our best, but that part often does mostly fall on the author. They're the people who book readings and share it on social media. We do too as well, but it's definitely a consideration, and it's something we try to be very upfront with them about at the beginning. We can make advanced review copies, we can send them out places, but if you are actively seeking reviewers, that is going to be more helpful. We can send your book out for post-publication awards. But if you have an idea of how you want to target that, if you know about the local awards in your state, that helps us too. so it's definitely something that falls to the author a lot of the time, but we are scrappy and we do our best with the resources that we do have.
Every writer I know now has to do so much of their own promotion, but it's it has become a part of the job that many writers have come to actually enjoy, because you get to connect more personally with the readers, which is wonderful. Earlier in the conversation, the name of Francisco Aragon came up because he was instrumental in bringing J. Michael into the Noemi Press fold. And as I recall, he is part of the advisory board for the press. Could you talk a little bit about the role of the advisory board, whether they participate in discussions about which manuscripts you're going to bring in, or how they contribute?
Our advisory board is very sort of symbolic and hands-on. Francisco is the exception because he came to me several years ago with the proposal of doing a series of books, one a year, that was, experimental Latinx writing. And that's the Acrylica series, named after the Juan Felipe Herrera book, which we're doing a reprint of. And so we've been collaborating with him in, first with some fiscal support, and now it's, trying to help us get promotion and readings for the people that we publish. So, but again, he trusts the instincts of our editors. So he's always very excited and surprised by who we publish next, but then understands the narrative of the series. I think it's a beautiful story from book to book, what we're talking about when we talk about experimental or whatever, avant-garde, vanguard, what have you, Latinx poetry.
So here at San Jose State, we are super excited that that J. Michael Martinez will be joining the faculty next year. And of course, one of the things that we're wondering is how your editorial role in Noemi Press may dovetail with your role here, and if anything you can foresee in that vein.
I foresee much. No, I definitely see looking to see the young writers, to see what kind of roles they can play in supporting the press, and how we can bring the press and how the institution can support Noemi as well. And I think these are all things that I definitely will be investigating in order to bring the authors, and to bring authors to campus and show these young people that they can publish, that they can do these things. I mean, I think in many ways, Noemi still has that vital punk spirit that I think animated its origin, and to promote that with students, to say you don't necessarily need to find a press to publish you. You can publish you. This is what you can do. You can make things happen. You own the means of production, and you can change the narrative that gets promoted out there. And that's sort of a spirit that I definitely would like to bring to SJSU. Let's make things happen.
That sounds fantastic. I know that a lot of that I and a lot of my fellow students really welcome that that energy and that information. So to extend that conversation a little bit further, so for those who might be interested in starting their own independent literary press, is there any particular line of study or work experience that the three of you think would be really important and for building skills?
I think fundamentally, for a small press that publishes poetry, very compelling fiction, in a press like that, it's really about the love of the literature and love of the language and love of community, since it's part of the role of any press is that invention of community. And I think that all you need is a copy machine, even less now. All you need is access to the internet to make a journal or even an ebook. And I encourage everyone to go out and do it. That's sort of where I am in that conversation. Carmen, Sarah?
As managing editor, I would say that having that spirit, but also some logistics is probably helpful. I mean, I learned how to design books. I have learned how to do accounting. I feel like you can learn these things as you go, but finding some of those basic skills to tap into before you start might be useful.
So
I should say then, for me, like, it's good to have a good team with the Sarah.
Yes. Yeah, I think that we have a very, very tight group. We are able to, I've edited with every single editor. I think you all have also edited with Diana and Susie. We all participate in choosing books, and even though we don't choose the book, we are excited about editing. We talk to each other a lot about the book, so it's not these siloed experiences. And that's this magic that has to take place, and I think you see the magic in the books because the books are so good. They're beautiful. Sarah has a gorgeous designer eye, thank God, and they're well crafted, thoughtful books that are legible in the world. The thing about publishing is a book has to tell a story that someone can identify and name. The books we publish don't often have that working to their advantage. So part of the conversation we have with an author is, let's name what that legibility is. So the person you're speaking to, when you bring that book into the world, will find it. We don't advertise in magazines or do web ads. So it really is a kind of word of mouth experience. But I think the books come into the world and they tell a story, and they connect themselves to several lineages or several movements. And so that creates the legibility and the aura. But that wouldn't happen if we weren't like clicking really well like a machine, and every person who touches the book only pushes it forward.
So it sounds like, in contrast to many of the large for-profit publishers, you do all the design, all the editing in-house, which allows you to have more control over the process and more sort of intimate connection with the final process, with the final book, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I want to be clear that I don't design all the books. I've done a couple because that's something I'm interested in also. But we do have a team of people that we reach out to that we trust, and we try to match them as closely as possible with the spirit of the book to make sure that it exists in the world the way that it should.
Understood. So I'd like to shift for a moment to a little bit different topic. You all are so passionate about the work that this press is doing, but I know two of you at least, I'm not sure about Sarah, but Carmen and J. Michael, you are both writers as well. So how do you balance the demands of your writing life and your work at the press?
All of the staff are poets. In fact, Anthony Cody, J. Michael, and myself are all three of us are National Book Award finalists. So it's a unique staff of folks who are very actively writing. And personally, I think editing for Noemi Press has made me an infinitely better poet, infinitely better, because I hold myself to the same accountability that I bring to every other book that I participate in. I have a very objective ability, like the ego part of it, I've exorcised that out of my body, in part because I see what happens when someone takes that risk. And it's always good stuff. And so I learn from every book that I edit. I learn from my fellow editors how to think about what a book is.
I guess for me, I don't distinguish the editing from the writing. To me, it's all the same process. And I too am infinitely a much better editor of my own work because of the work I've done with other writers for the press. It's really forced me to think about the book as an object, how to think about arranging poems, how I think about what poem deserves to be published. And so it's really, for me, educational in the process. And it helps me always to be in the mentality of an apprentice and to be open to learn from the text that I'm receiving and to see where that can help expand my own poetics. And so it's totally a reciprocal process that I think is wonderfully romantically dialectic in the give and take between the author and editor. I'll pause there. Thank you.
I'm proudly a very slow writer. And I think that some of that does come from working with Noemi, working with the books all of the time. When you have such a behind the scenes view of how a book actually gets made step by step, it sort of makes me at least want to make sure that my work is ready for that, that it can go through that process and I can be proud of it in the end.
Oh, those are really inspiring answers, I have to say. And it gives me hope. I've also found that editing improves my writing, but it's so time consuming. So, so can you talk a little bit about the niche in literary publishing and poetry in particular that Noemi Press has succeeded in filling?
I would argue that we stopped the idea of a niche, right? And we said, this isn't what we're doing, is we're just publishing fantastic writers. We are not white supremacists, so it's not like we needed to do anything special to find work by people of color. I feel like, in part, it's exciting to work with editors of color, which distinguishes us from a lot of other presses, is that we have some of our editors are people of color. But when I'm feeling my most arrogant, I think, well, Noemi is uncategorizable, and we taught everybody how to do that, right? Like, we taught people how to have a deep, diverse, strange, exciting list that's inclusive, but not in a cosmetic way, just in the way that, like, all of the writers that we publish are amazing. And if we publish their first books, they all go on to do really exciting, interesting, different things. So yeah, that's when I'm feeling arrogant. That's what I think.
So you strive for an eclectic aesthetic mix in your list. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't think it's even striving. Everybody has a voice. Everyone participates. We are personally, our tastes are very different. And we're all from, Gen X, millennial, Gen Z, like we cover the gamut. We're tapped into different communities. But again, what ends up happening is these books come into Noemi and we work with the author to bring out the very best version of the book. So it's not just like by cosmetic is like, okay, we're going to take this book, let's just publish it. I don't know how to talk about it with the authors. That we have to know how to talk about it with the author before we decide to publish it. And I think those ethos are why our books get the attention they have and just are as good as they are.
Could you talk a little bit about the importance of partnerships with other arts organizations, such as your partnership with Costura Creative, and how you go about finding partners? No one wants to take that question.
I guess
I don't think I'm not going to answer that.
I mean, we are always looking for partnerships that can help support the books, however that manifests, right? We want the books to do well, and so if that means partnering with publicity at some point in time, or our longstanding partnership with Letras Latinas, those things can help uplift the books and get them to audiences that we might not be able to reach on our own.
And in some cases, those partnerships have led to new imprints. Is that correct?
The only imprint we have that's a partnership is Acrylica. Right. So everything else is part of our little universe.
Fantastic. Well, this has been fascinating. Could you give us a little taste of what you think might be coming next for Noemi Press? Are there goals that you want to fulfill with the organization that you haven't quite reached, or any new exciting projects that are coming up?
I guess I would just say one thing, and that is we're at this moment in which we are a really successful press with a stupidly small budget, and a kind of unsustainable model. And so figuring out how to position ourselves as a nonprofit to get the support we need to support just the volume of books that we're selling, because you need money in order to print all of it's wonderful to sell a lot of books, but you have to have the money, and we're not even paying staff, so we can't move forward until we address that factor, right? But we also, like, the kind of money we need is very is substantial because of how we've just sort of exploded. So to me, that's what I stay awake at night thinking about.
Planning to get the funding stream to match your needs. Yeah. J. Michael, any big exciting plans for your part in the press?
I just love working with the authors, and I mean, a vision in the future, maybe a digital anthology that doesn't exclude but is constantly inclusive. But yeah, I mean, recently working with a couple new authors, and I'm excited about their books and what's happening with them in the visual sense, as there's more visual design going into the work. And it's pretty exciting to see that development occur. But yeah, I'm just excited to work with people and to talk writing. That's sort of my role, and it fits perfectly with me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I am looking forward to see what comes next from Noemi Press. I have really enjoyed many of your books, and looking forward to what's coming next. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for talking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to invite Timothy Seck of Read Magazine to join me in conversation with the panelists. I'm here with Tim Seck, the lead fiction editor for Read Magazine, issues 153 and 154. And we have a few more questions for our panelists. I just now found out, Carmen, that you worked on Read Magazine back in the day in 1991 to 94, I believe you said. Do you have any reminiscences for us?
I mean, it was paper submissions, so that was always fun, trying to keep track of them. And gosh, I don't remember much about it. CLA was my big commitment.
It is certainly a huge commitment today. Tim and I do almost nothing else.
Okay, so I can jump in here. Thank you very much for this panel discussion. It was really great to hear, and thank you for your time. So on the note of time, since this contest that the press operates probably yields a lot of manuscripts, and we're all people capable of burnout and developing cynicism towards the work that we actually truly love. I'm just curious about what methods or means or psychic space clearings you exercise to remain fresh towards the abundant amount of material, because I find it so easy to just become very cynical despite my best energies and attitudes otherwise.
I think you just have to come to the table remembering that everybody works very earnestly to produce something. And so just a generosity of just wanting to give the honor that, but to know that people fail, or it's just like that moment, it's not what the issue is shaping up to be, that there's so many different things that inform how something ends up in a magazine, how something ends up being selected. The idea of creating something that has a conversation and is exciting also keeps me open in how I read and stay uncynical.
Logistically, it helps to have more than one reader looking at each piece, because someone might be not in the mood to experience that manuscript at that particular time, but the next person who comes by might see its potential. And so that's a very important part of our process, is making sure that each manuscript is read twice.
I'm just cynical.
To make it work.
No.
Right?
Actually, I'm not. I'm completely optimistic. But I think that's part of the process. Like at some point, you're going to be reading and you're going to read the same line in a similar poem as 60 other manuscripts. And I think that's a lesson as an editor, is that you begin to discern what gets sent in and what probably needs some more work. And it really becomes intuitive to, when you're reading that much, to see what, oh, this needs some more time devoted to it. This one is fashioned and ready to go, a poem or a manuscript. You begin to discern the differences very clearly at some point. And so the reading becomes a bit, it isn't a slog as you learn the technique of how to discern. So.
Thank you. I mean, I am not nearly as experienced as you all are in this press thing, so it's definitely something I continuously have to be mindful of and grapple with. So perhaps this next question might be well received or not, but are there any trends in terms of content or voice that just perhaps make your editorial senses lurch towards, whether in terms of positive or negative? I just know from my reading, I noticed particular recurrences in even just the read submissions. So how do you all resolve yourselves with that lurch that happens, whether it's a trend that's recurring and might be a little one note, yet there's potential within the material itself, or something that is just something that maybe you as a press don't want to continue contributing to a populated landscape of presses?
I don't know how to answer this. Carmen?
I can pop in. Again, I'm always thinking about how we make the books, because that's my job. And I guess the biggest trend that I have noticed is that books are becoming more complex to design. And that's something that we have to think about and build into the process. But I think part of what makes us unique is being able to go with that instead of pushing against it, like some presses might. They might feel like we don't have the resources to do this or present it in the right way, and we just do it anyway. And so I think seeing trends, you have that choice. You always have the choice to lean into it and like pick the best of that thing and present it, or find a way to package it in a way that it will find its audience, or you can push against it. And neither is the wrong decision. It's just about what you want the end product to be.
Yeah, and as an addendum to that, one way I would reply to the question is that it's something that I think Sarah kind of alluded to. I know that if find a trend of a kind of poem that gets submitted to something, I think like a few years ago it was self-portraits. And at that point, I'd written a number of self-portraits, and maybe I'm just projecting my own self-hatred of my own work, of dealing with self-portraiture. But the thing is there's also that part of me that's like, oh man, another self-portrait. But then there's the part of me that's like, someone's going to do a self-portrait that's going to blow me away, and I want to read that. And so to me, like, I can't really land on either side of the judgment, because I want to read the one that blows me away, that allows me to fall back in love again with a certain form. And that's just part of the process, is learning to balance in that place of compassion between what I want and my desire and what I really need to read. I'll pause there, I guess.
I would add that one hard, fast rule I have when I'm looking at something is I find what is the best moment in a piece of writing, and I just sort of ask myself, why is this the best, and why isn't it like this all throughout the poem, or all throughout the book, or all throughout the story or essay. And if there are moments, and then you sort of say, oh, look at all of these other moments that kind of stand up to it and speak to it. To me, that's where the promise comes from. When it comes to books, I think a lot of books come via MFA theses. And there are things like the self-portrait, like erasures now. Everyone has an erasure. Everyone has a poem with the line from Ross Gay. These kinds of things that start off as exercises. But a book isn't an archive. And so that's the other, when we're looking at books, we're, just like, oh, you wrote 40 poems, drop them in a file. There has to be dynamism across it. And so when work goes out prematurely, I'm pretty good at sniffing that out, whether it's in a book or a poem. And I think that's come from, I was editing 30 years ago, it sounds like. So.
Thank you so very much for these really thoughtful answers. Gives me a lot to reflect upon. And I'll turn it back over to Anne.
That's same from me. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all today and give us a glimpse of what we can aspire to in a few years' time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Anne.
Well, it was really fun revisiting that conversation, which took place about a month ago. Now I'm very excited about the next portion of our program, in which our panelists will each read a poem or two that they have specially selected for our program. Carmen, would you like to take the lead?
Okay, so I'm going to read a couple of poems from Besiege Me, which is a book that just came out by Nick Wong. So I'm going to read, the first poem is called Self-Portrait is My Boyfriend's Rolex. He wanted to be thought of as all that's left and left with more prep and monologues of strange proteins. Your first date with him, looking back, would your face change if you already knew? Then in his car seats reclined, you kissed the curve of his thumb, sniffed his hair scented with work. He told you how he raged at the hospital triage. Cheap fucks took my watch. How he became a human sugar cube in meth parties. You felt like windshield wipers made to clear glass underwater. He said, it's not like I wanted it. It took your hand some time to touch his trembling wrist, rub my crystal face. Admit it, you like it too, the bare erotics of denial. And then the next one is called Nationalism is a Tote Bag I Use Every Day. It's strap capable of strangers. I wear it cross-bodily for evening occasions, dolphin planks at the gym, penetrating random men. The tote morphs. It starts calling itself high fashion. Its ego opens holes to lose my keys every time I join a protest. I find myself huddling in the tote to make space for the designer's expectations, uphold faith in the Three Gorges Dam, retract my condemning tongue as walls of stone collapse. At home, the sight of it repulses me. I say, we live together, but we live far apart. To stop thoughts about my divided home, I sleep. But some nights, beads keep falling between the walls, and I remember a story about communists who flick marbles before stitching their love marks on our lips. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Those were beautiful poems. I'd appreciate it if you would drop the name of the book in the chat so people can find it.
Sure. Yeah, I'll drop a link.
Fantastic. Great. J. Michael, do you have some poems for us today?
Yes. I'd like to read a few poems or a poem from Black Peculiar from Khadijah Queen, which I highly recommend, Black Peculiar. And I'll read from the title poem, Black Peculiar Energy Complex. Analogies to imaginary letters to various facets of self. Marked upon is to relational dark as diabetic is to aesthetics. Dear puppets, I want to make you say things I cannot, but I don't want your mouths to move. Stitched shut is to slipshod as material is to immovable. Dear buttons, I cannot sew you on properly without my favorite needle. Wait just a moment while I dig it out. Dysphoria is to metaphysical toilets as burned tendons is to drunken interest. Dear master, I'm running away from you now. Peculiar too is to dark-skinned as milk toast is to imagining. Dear mother, I'm white-haired and bundled with fear. Alluring figures as to Deridian abundance as to interference. Dear invisible reference point, let's say we take a certain counterpoint out of the picture, the moment of strangulation perhaps. If the peculiar energy becomes complex, just call it black. Applicable commitments is to attention, as immediate is to biochemical appreciation. Dear alignment, first I questioned the witching, then I created, siphoned, something pure in the marked cooling. Utterance is to come across as non-entities are to superseding. Dear reader, do you want me to keep going? Has the profane frequency been reached? Thank you. This is Black Peculiar from Khadijah Queen, and I'll put a little note into the chat.
Thank you, J. Michael. And Sarah Jemsky, do you have some poems that you'd like to share?
I do, and I don't mean to be narcissistic, but I am going to read some of my own work.
Yes.
So the first poem is about a video game called Luigi's Mansion 3. Luigi is stuck in a hotel full of ghosts, and he has to use a shadow self and various forms of light to defeat them. It's called Playing Video Games During the Pandemic to Control the Uncontrollable. There is no beautiful way to tell you I'm depressed. Faced with so many compounding horrors, my body sets to slow fade, a phantom. I've been losing my days running headlong into battles full of predictable violence. Rules set, weapons provided, each level one shade harder than the last. This monotony is cold comfort, but at least my hands are busy. Sometimes I need metaphors to deal with all the ghosts. I imagine being Luigi's therapist to help us both confront our trauma. Every room you've entered was a new opportunity to die, but somehow you're still here. It's okay to be afraid. The specter of death is frightening, and how could either of us have known it would creep into every corner? I say to my partner, Luigi is a mentally healthy man. What I mean is, he celebrates even the smallest victories of being alive. The game is not over yet. Wahoo! Together, Luigi and I are becoming the version of ourselves that approaches the sum of our hauntings, shaking in our boots, shining a steady light until they materialize, tangible and shrieking. Here we go. And then this last one is really short, and the title comes from a popular Christian song about going to heaven. It's called Surrounded by Your Glory, What Will My Heart Feel? I want to see the face of God without the pain that follows. I am intimate with the cost of awe, how heaven hurts the people it's promised to. The crystalline sounding in the heads and the wings of holy creatures who will never walk on streets paved with gold. Christian daughters are made of apologies to heaven and earth both. We are revisions of sons. Our rib bones will show if we believe hard enough that we were made only for forever worship. No hell could hold me so well as a cage of light and a promise that my words are holy. If I sing hallelujah, that the echoes back will sanctify the distance between this baffled prodigal and kingdom come. Hallelujah, if I can just imagine it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And I don't think any of us poets should ever have to apologize for reading our own work. You know, I think we should all seize the day. And that was beautiful. All three of those readings were so wonderful and so short, and I wish we could devote more time to it. But I really am eager to get to the questions from our audience. So there are two ways that people can ask questions. You can raise your hand using the Zoom function, and we can unmute you to ask your question live. Or if you prefer, you can put the question in the chat and we'll ask it for you. I have gotten a few behind the scenes already, and I would like to actually start the Q&A with a couple really highly practical technical questions. For instance, how do you go about finding a good, reliable, and affordable printer? Do you have one? And can we have their name and number?
We work with Bookmobile. They are in Minnesota. I don't know how we got started working with them. Carmen probably does, but they've been good to us. And so we've stuck with them this whole time.
At the time, it was just who was the cheapest and who made the best looking books. And that was Bookmobile. And like Sarah said, they've been good partners to us. They've been very flexible with us, and they know how we work. And so we don't have a reason to change.
That's completely understandable. Do they also do your distribution, or do you have a separate book distributor?
We work with SPD.
SPD. And can you talk a little bit about that process? They also specialize in distribution for small presses, right? That's an acronym for small press distribution, as I recall.
Yeah. Again, I wasn't around when all of this got started, but we submit information about each book to them, and then they send us an order for however many of the book they want. And sometimes we give them a heads up, like, hey, you only ordered 100 of this book, but I think that this person is going to blow up, so maybe you should order a couple more. But it's very much, we rely on orders from them, and they have their own ways of managing that part of it internally. And when they run out, they email me and we order more.
So what is a typical print run for a Neomi Press book?
We start at 500 copies. And then go up from there. We don't have typical print runs. We're not print on demand either, where you can just order one copy of a book. But we do, Bookmobile works with us really well on doing smaller print runs when we need them of about 100 copies or 200 copies, so that we can keep space in our office, honestly, and then also make sure that everyone stays stocked who needs to be.
So it sounds like your books often go into multiple editions. Yeah. That sounds like a really nice, flexible system. And so you can respond to the market. We should take note. I have a couple of questions from the audience here. Paul McNamara asks, has your criteria for what makes a good poem changed from what you learned in school to what you've observed and edited today in the press? And if so, how?
I'll take that one. Absolutely. I think when I was younger, in the mid-20s, when I was getting an MFA, I definitely was a bit more sure of what a quote-unquote good poem was or is. And at this point in my life, I have no idea what a good poem is, because my idea of a good poem changes from the morning to the evening. And I value that. As part of my effort in poetry is to expand my own sense of cognition and my ability to perceive, and also my ability to render those perceptions and that awareness. And for poetry, for me, as a kind of a practice of consciousness and awareness, to be able to have various forms to put those kind of consciousness and awareness into. It's hard for me to judge morally, like the good or badness of someone's perception until I've engaged and worked through how their awareness is operating in the text. And I'll pause there. That's a bit more complex than simple yes or no, but thank you. And I left entirely.
So that was interesting because you were talking a lot about how your perception or your judgment, right, has moved on, and that is completely understandable. Has it also affected your writing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I read a poem and I'm thinking about the work that that poem is doing, and this is different for me versus like a poem I read in a journal versus a poem I'm writing. If it's my own work I'm working on, like, to value its worth is to, in the sense of good or bad, is to put it into a type of frame that doesn't do justice to the process of creation, as that form or that poem in a year or two, or that line, which I may hate today, in 20 years will suddenly be the perfect line in a poem, which I've had experienced, where there was a poem that I didn't think was worthwhile at all when I wrote it when I was 23, and then when it got published when I was 39, that language resonated in a way to me that it didn't have before. And to me, that demonstrates like the malleability of that sense of the aesthetic of what is good, what is bad. As far as the subjectivity of those values, to me, like, it's a conversation, individual poem with that individual writer. And if there's a connection there, to me, that's the value. As I know that, like, there's an Instagram poet, that Rupi Kapoor, that so many young poets right now, they love. And fantastic. I'm so glad that they found someone who gets them to love poetry and to get into it. When I read her work, I'm not that compelled, but then what interests me in the work and what I go to the work is doing different kind of work than what she's doing. And it's for me to say that that work isn't valuable really is dismissing such a range of people and their experiences. So
Right. I mean, not every work is designed to work to appeal to every audience. And the other thing is that the literary landscape that we all inhabit is constantly changing. And so that, that's why we can always go back and revisit work, and it will resonate differently. It has to. Our language is changing. Yeah, it's fascinating. So Helen Maservi wonders what factors make the decision between competing works that may speak to the same readership or overlap significantly in style or subject matter.
I mean, is it awful to say just sort of a feeling, vibes?
You know, when you see it.
Yeah, especially with us, we sort of know the other editors and what they're looking for, and so all of these things wind up being taken into account as well. It's not just me reading something and saying I like it or I don't. It's who might this fit well with? Does it fit into our mission or aesthetic as a press? And does it feel ready for the work we are going to do?
We all use our gut feel, I think, in these things. Sarah Dalton Erickson wonders, every book and its editing needs are different and distinct, but do you have some common or favorite editing techniques that you could share with us, those of us who are still coming up in the field? Either for editing other people's work or for our own work.
well, in terms of books, like to speak about editing a longer book, that's a different conversation. As all of those poems are in conversation with each other, ideologically, in form, etc. But for me, I think in my own poetry, one of the best things I've learned comes from my friend Matthias Valina, who he told me that when he writes a poem, he ends up putting a poem into 4 or 5 different forms. So he'll write a sonnet, and then he'll take that language and turn it into a prose poem. And then he'll take it into just a free verse lineated form. And then he'll take it and try it into another form. And to me, that is a lot of fun, and it's very painful, as well as I may be infatuated with how I've arranged that poem. But it's also good because it reveals to me places where the poem can expand further, where I can develop something else. The music of the language may shine differently in this form, and I can cut and paste this line from that form and put it into this one and have it all mixed up. But to me, that was very helpful as a way to get over my infatuation with my own poetry and the forms they take, as a way to push me into an uncomfortable place.
I have another question for the practical side, and that is, do you have a sense of what percentage of your budget is devoted to marketing?
Very little. We talked about this a little bit in the previous discussion we had, but most of our money has to go back into printing books and maintaining ourselves as a press. So very little. A lot of the marketing budget we do have winds up being for submissions for post-publication awards. It's not quite the same as marketing, but it winds up being marketing if your book is shortlisted for an NBA. So we sort of consider that to be marketing, but it's very little of our budget, 5%.
What advice do you have for writers who want to support small presses and also swing to the fence in terms of getting their own work out there and in terms of audience? So do you have any recommendations for these writers? I think many of us are in that boat.
If you want to support small presses, buy directly from them. Even if you can get our books through small press distribution, you should always order from a small press's website directly. It's the way that we get the most money for any given book.
I think also to kind of be aware that small presses, a lot of us are volunteer and we do it for the love of the work. And a lot of hours to read and to have these conversations, which are really lovely and beautiful. And part of that idea, like to the volunteering of our time to support this, is that go out to the readings, attend small press events, as you'll get to meet the writers, you'll get to meet the editors and the publishers, and it's about community and community formation. And once you get to meet these people and how welcoming they are, you get networked, and you get invited to different other readings, and then you're invited to read, because it is about just the love of the language. It's a small press community that is devoted to that community. And it's about participation. And the more you participate in the community, the more access you end up getting.
Thank you. Yes, I have certainly noticed that in the Bay Area. The more you show up for other people, they will reciprocate. So it's wonderful. That's about all the time we have for questions. So I want to thank our esteemed panelists. It's been a fascinating conversation. And I also want to thank our audience. And I just want to remind everyone that, as J. Michael Martinez so notably said, you can publish you own the means of production. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been watching a masterclass on independent press literary publishing at the San Jose State University Legacy of Poetry Festival. The festival is presented by the Poets and Writers Coalition of San Jose State in association with associated students and the San Jose State Department of English and Comparative Literature. The festival's many events are co-sponsored by the Diasporic Peoples Writers Collective, Read Magazine, the oldest continuously published college literary magazine west of the Mississippi, Poetry Center San Jose, and Poetry Flash, the literary calendar and newsletter for California and the West. For further information about the San Jose State University Legacy of Poetry events, go to the URL that's shown on the screen and that we've also put in the chat, or follow the San Jose State Legacy of Poetry Festival on social media. This is Alan Soldowski, executive producer of the San Jose State University Poetry Festival, wishing everyone a good afternoon and good writing.
time.